Cryptocurrencies such as Bitcoin are fast becoming a popular choice as a method of payment worldwide. In an effort to sensitize locals about this complex form of finance, Beng Windhoek recently held an information sharing session where a South African cryptocurrency expert was brought in to explain the origins of the concept. We sat with Economist Claudia Boamah to explain to us what Bitcoin is, how it compares to other cryptocurrencies, as well as traditional forms of currencies backed by government. Currently, it is illegal to use virtual currencies in Namibia. We would thus find out about its prospects locally. Hello and welcome to One Exclusive. I'm your host, Joseph Sheefeni. Now here in the studio to talk to us about this topic is economic analyst at Capricorn Asset Management, Claudia Boamah. Claudia, welcome to One Exclusive.
Thanks for having me.
To start things off, we've been hearing so much about Bitcoins lately. Can you tell us what it is and how it works?
It's funny that we're only really talking about it now because it's actually been in existence since 2009. Bitcoin is an alternative digital cryptocurrency. It was created by a person or people called Satoshi Nakamoto. We're not sure if it's a person or an individual because it's a pseudonym. So that I'm sure
Sounds Japanese, though.
It sounds Japanese, but I'm sure as the discussion progresses, we'll see how this anonymity of whoever even created it might create some problems. But yeah, it's an alternative digital cryptocurrency. Alternative referring to the fact that it's not regulated or is applied or created by a central authority like a central bank. Digital, this is, I think, cryptocurrencies are 100% digital. That means that they exist in a virtual realm, not in a physical realm. It's not tangible. Even though you always see Bitcoin with a gold coin next to it and a B sort of dollar sign on it, there's no actual physical coin that you can touch, that you can call a Bitcoin. It all exists electronically. And then finally, it's considered as a cryptocurrency because the creation, the supply, and the regulation, in the absence of a better word, regulation of Bitcoin is secured through a process or a skill known as cryptography. That means that everything is in code. They use numbers generated by the system, and that secures any transaction, the creation of it, the transfer of it to other people.
Now, how is one able to actually get into trading Bitcoins?
It exists on a network called the blockchain. Now, as the name suggests, blockchain, this network is basically a series of blocks that are interconnected. Now, what happens is this blockchain is supposed to be a centralized ledger, which will record any transactions using or any transfers of Bitcoins. But in order for this ledger to be maintained, it requires a lot of computational power because it's a global ledger. So the information stored on it is huge. So what happens is, in order for the supply to be created, these people are referred to as miners. This is the creation of Bitcoin is referred to as mining. So these miners or users of blockchain would subscribe, and when they subscribe, it means they're allowing their computer to become part of this network and store this central ledger. So in exchange for allowing the person's personal computer to be used for the creation of this, to be used on this network, they in turn get Bitcoins or they get fractions of Bitcoins. And that is how it is actually created. And then on this blockchain network, if one is to transfer a Bitcoin from between individuals or whatever, then it creates an entry. And this entry is called a block. So every block is linked to another block. One user, say user A, subscribes to this network and allows their computer to be used. In exchange, or the incentive they get is that they get Bitcoins. Now, I want to transfer my Bitcoins to another person, maybe for the purpose of a transaction. So to transfer these Bitcoins to the next person, a block will be created. This block will show how much of my Bitcoin is going to person B, and it is also going to show that it came from me to person B. When person B also transfers, it will show that I initially, person A, transferred it to person B, and then person B who passes on to person C will also create another block. And so the block always shows the transaction history that pertains to specific Bitcoins. And that also speaks to how, I guess, the security of the system is concerned, because if a particular miner or user of Bitcoin is missing from this series, then that's when it will, I guess, be flagged on the system and you'd be able to see something is wrong, because it should show the history, where it came from, every time it's passed on to the next person.
I get the idea that somehow it's a way of acquiring goods and services without actually paying real money for it, as is in the conventional way.
It depends. If a specific vendor of a good or service has decided that they accept Bitcoin as payment for their good or service, then yes, it can be used as a medium of exchange. But if it's not, then you can't use it. So it's not legal tender. It doesn't have any law backing that it should be accepted. So you can't just get Bitcoins and go anywhere and expect to be able to spend it.
Nor can one pay tax on it?
Not in Namibia. I understand Japan has accepted Bitcoin as legal tender, so maybe over there you can settle your taxes with the cryptocurrency, but over here the answer is no.
Speaking of Namibia, I would like to know about the prospects of cryptocurrencies such as Bitcoins here in Namibia. Are we seeing exchanges of these sorts of currencies here locally?
From research conducted, I think, by the central bank, it seems very negligible at this stage. They don't consider that it's going to have an impact on our currency's value even at this point. So, no, it's definitely not used as a means of transacting in Namibia. It's not allowed.
So it's illegal?
I wouldn't say illegal, because I guess that implies there's some kind of consequence, punitive consequence for using it. But the powers that be that regulate the use of money in this country have stated that you would do so at your own risk. So between the two of us, if I want to give you my cell phone and in exchange I'm willing to accept your Bitcoin, and I'm not able to redeem that Bitcoin in the form of currency, that's a risk that I'm taking. It's not legal tender, so I can't expect the Bank of Namibia to enforce that anyone in Namibia should give me a certain amount of money in exchange for that Bitcoin that you gave me for my phone. So it's not, I don't know of anybody that's trading any of their goods or services in this country right now for Bitcoin. The other use for it could be as a investment alternative. Again, I'm not sure if Namibian financial institutions are offering that to the public, but if you are able, a lot of financial transactions can take place now on an electronic platform. So if somehow between 2009 and now you manage to go ahead and put some of your money in that because you felt you would get a good return on Bitcoin, and I think a lot of people who did that are now smiling, that could be one way that I think Namibians might be participating in the use of it. But it's not on a large scale. It's not something that's currently affecting how we value our currency. It's not accepted as foreign exchange, and Yeah, you basically, if you are using it, you bear the consequence of using it.
You've talked basically about how Bitcoin is different from traditional forms of currencies backed by government. But what about when it comes to other cryptocurrencies? How different is it from those other currencies as well?
It's alternatives. Bitcoin has its own brand. There's Dogecoin, there's Ethereum, I think. They're just basically other brands, I guess, for cryptocurrencies. But I think as far as legislation has been adapted to this new phenomenon, it covers cryptocurrencies, not just Bitcoin. I think Bitcoin was the first of its kind. It's the most popular, so that's why people tend to use it interchangeably. Cryptocurrency, Bitcoin, it's not the same thing. Bitcoin is a kind of cryptocurrency, just like all the other examples out there.
You mentioned that when you use it, especially locally, it's going to be at your own risk. What other drawbacks are there, when it comes to using Bitcoins? Because using cryptocurrencies such as these is becoming the norm, like you mentioned, in developed countries such as Japan, South Korea, and in the US as well.
First of all, when we began this conversation, I mentioned the Satoshi Nakamoto. We don't know who this person or this group of people are. So there's no legal backing for it. So that's the first drawback. When there is no legal backing, it creates certain risks. For example, when we spoke about me selling my cell phone to you for Bitcoin, if whoever Satoshi is decides, or if somehow the system that they've created decides it's not going to give me whatever the value or current value of Bitcoin is in US dollars, that's a credit risk for me, because I have used real money to invest in this asset. If at some point I would like it to be liquid, I would like it to turn back into real money again, so that I can transfer to the purchase of another asset, I can buy some goods or services, and at that time when I need that money, I can't get it. It creates a risk. So that's...
You can't ask for it either.
Currently, that's not the situation, but because we don't know who's behind it, and there is no country in which there is a legal jurisdiction for Bitcoin, these are the kind of things that can happen, that if you want to redeem this Bitcoin in real money, you might not get it. If you want to redeem Bitcoin in real money and it's reached a point where the value has plummeted compared to when you initially invested in it, you just have to accept it. And it can happen. I think that is the biggest issue that people who don't agree with this new technology is that it seems as if it's a bubble. Over time, we've seen various market bubbles. We've had the US housing market bubble, which plunged all of us into a global recession. Before that, we've had the dot-com bubble. Before that, way back in history, there was something called a tulip bubble, where there was a time when the flower, the tulip, was so valuable in, I think, the Netherlands, that people started paying ridiculous prices, even prices equivalent to that of a home, for this flower. And like Bitcoin, it was accepted, tulips were accepted because they were popular. Everyone was just flocking to it. There was no actual special value, intrinsic value in the flower. Couldn't really be used for much, but it was popular, it was accepted because it was popular, until one day it wasn't. Until one day, because as people are flocking to it, then more of a supply might be created, until eventually that supply was just so large. And when people finally realize, well, everyone can have a tulip, it's no longer special. That's the thing about things that aren't scarce. Things that are not limited in supply, they tend to lose value. So if it gets to a point where this Bitcoin bubble bursts as bubbles have burst in the past, that creates a huge problem. Those who are not quick enough to react to changes in the market would lose a lot. Right now, I think the value is tens of thousands if you buy now. And then imagine a year from now, it plunges back to its original value, which was in cents. You've lost a lot. And there is no legal standing, there is no legal backing, there's nothing that can be done to get a person's money back, to get some kind of compensation. There's nothing that can be done. So I think that it has all the markings of a bubble as we've seen them in history. I think that is one of the biggest concerns that those who are not really fans of Bitcoin might have.
The other concern also is the financial institutions, global financial institutions, that have expressed concern over the emergence of Bitcoins. But why would banks fear the rise of cryptocurrency? I mean, certainly it's the future, one could say.
I think it just comes down to the lack of regulation, which leads to the risks as I have outlined them just now. Banks have also assumed a position as a middleman. So a lot of these new technologies might result in a situation where certain institutions might no longer be useful. For example, the emergence of Uber has really disrupted the transportation sector, such that in countries where there are metered taxis, there's a lot of competition. And those who own those kind of taxis, traditional taxis, are not happy that Uber has arrived. The emergence of Airbnb has relegated hotels, bed and breakfast, the traditional institutions that provide lodging. That has also brought in competition, that a lot of them are no longer making the bottom line like they used to. And it's, in this case, cryptocurrencies kind of challenge the banking industry, because it removes the bank as a middleman. It's a peer-to-peer network. I want to give you money in exchange for something. It doesn't go through a financial system. It goes directly to you, and I get whatever it is I want in exchange. So from a private interest standpoint, I think that's where banks might be coming from in their resistance to Bitcoin. But also in the interest of consumer protection, in the interest of protecting the financial industries, when these bubbles burst, it's not contained to just those who owned houses, just those who took out mortgages, for example, in 2008. Everything was affected. Because resources have been detracted from other sectors in the economy and put into another one. So if it just disappears, that has consequences for the society at large. And in this case, should this bubble burst, it would have international ramifications, because it is a globally used alternative currency. So in the interest, from the public interest standpoint, there isn't enough to protect those who would be investing in this. And I think another, public interest standpoint will be Bitcoin. The appeal of it is that there is anonymity. But that anonymity also creates an avenue for the use of this currency for nefarious purposes. People could be innocent. I could have a preference for Bitcoin because I'm an enthusiastic video or computer game player. And I think those type of services, because they're all in the realm of technology, tend to accept Bitcoin. But then, and on the other hand, I could very well be sending money to some terrorist network. I could very well be using the money to buy drugs. I could be using the money to even buy people. And you wouldn't know because the parties involved in the transaction are anonymous. Whereas through the banking system, it can be traced. Eventually you would know that's Claudia's account sending money to ISIS. And then, the law can take the necessary course that it's supposed to.
The fact that you said Bitcoins is just another bubble that could burst at any time, after that happens, are we likely to see yet again another cryptocurrency come up and take its place?
Yeah, it's not definitely a bubble, but it does bear the hallmarks of a bubble. But because of the advancement of technology, the fact that there is a demand for this, a convenient way to pay for things, a convenient way to remit people money around the world, even if Bitcoin or the current cryptocurrencies somehow crash, it is possible that another cryptocurrency would emerge or another group of cryptocurrencies would emerge. That's how technology works. You will improve on the failings of the previous attempts. So right now it's as if regulation is struggling to keep up with technology. You cannot simply say that regulation is stifling progress. Those regulations exist for a reason. As I've mentioned before, there's all kinds of risks involved in the lack of regulation right now. So supposing this crashes, another one emerges because of everything that might have gone wrong. If the bubble actually bursts, in future, the cryptocurrencies that would emerge from the ashes would probably have some kind of central regulation, a little bit more legitimacy. So it is possible that could happen after, supposing that a bubble actually bursts. And it could also be a series of attempts until people finally get it right, because we are increasingly becoming a global village. We don't want to have impediments to international transactions. So I personally think that, yes, there is a place for the kind of technology that even underlines Bitcoin, this blockchain thing, and cryptocurrencies themselves. There is a place for that. There is a demand for it. But there's no doubt that there are some kinks in the system as it exists right now. And should it collapse, it shouldn't be the end of it. I think we should just rather find a way to improve. And then...
All right, Claudia, any final words from your side?
I wouldn't throw my entire life savings into this. If this is from a personal standpoint.
That's not if it comes to Namibia.
If it comes to Namibia, or wherever in the world people might see this. Investment always involves an element of risk. And from where I work, for example, I think our philosophy is invest sensibly. So that would be tilting the scale more towards staying away from things like Bitcoin. But, you don't know what someone else's pocket looks like. Maybe there are some people out there with money to play around with, take risks that us ordinary people cannot take. So we need them also to test the system so that if in future there is to be improvements are to be made, those can be learned from them taking the risk in the first place, so that whatever problems might exist in the system as it exists right now can be exposed. If no one had invested in the tulips back then, we wouldn't know how this flocking towards an asset would work out. I'm really worried about sounding like I'm encouraging the use of Bitcoin, but just as is the case with any investment, you need to assess your own personal appetite for risk. There are high returns in this, but with any investment where there's a high return, there's an equally high risk. So if you assess that and you feel that you're in a position to take on that kind of a risk, that's at your discretion.
Claudia, it's so great talking to you.
It's been fun.
All right. And with that, we have come to the end of the show. Thanks for watching, and catch us again next time. And don't forget to share your views with us on our social media pages. From me, Joseph Sheefeni, it's goodbye.